retreats. I've led a couple of retreats in monasteries, and when I return home and reflect on my experience in the monasteries with parishioners and friends and others, I can always see very quickly an envy in them about life in a monastery. They see a monastery as an idyllic kind of place, a sort of paradise on earth, completely free of the demands and the pressures and the stresses of life in the world. And of course, those who are familiar with monastery life know that all that happens in the world is part of the life of a monastery. All of the stresses and the burdens, they're all there. But perhaps there are some lessons from monastery life that can be really useful for us living in the busyness of the demands of city or town life. One of these is perhaps the bells. The monastery bells ring several times every day, and the loudest voice in the monastery is the bell calling the monks or the nuns to prayer. So when the bell rings, everything is put on hold, everything is stopped, and the monks or the nuns go to the chapel to pray. It might be a prayer for 5 minutes, it might be prayer for an hour. And the reason for the bells is because even in a monastery, it's so easy to forget the reality of the love of God for us and the presence of God with us. We need to remember the love of God, which is the heart of the purpose of prayer. So my suggestion is that in whatever situation you find yourself, working in the cowshed or the factory or the office or in the home, to choose some things that are a regular part of your life and to see them as the bell. For me, I spend a lot of time in the car driving. A few years ago, I began to practice that every time I got into the car and put the key in the ignition, I heard that very movement as a monastery bell. And so what I would do is take about 5 seconds every time I did that to remember I'm not alone. It's not all up to me. God is with me. It took a few days of practice, but very soon it became an automatic thing. Key in the ignition. At that moment, I remembered the monastery bell for me had rung. I gave this example to someone a few years ago, and they came back saying, I'm not driving a lot, but I am in the office. The phone rings a lot. So every time I hear the phone ring, I take just a second, a split second or two, to remember God is with me. I am not alone. I invite you to choose whatever might be a regular, perhaps several times a day, even several times an hour activity, and to allow that to be the monastery bell for you, calling you to remember the fact without which we can't live. That is the fact that God is with us.